So likely the best place to go to see how slaves were treated in ancient biblical cultures is to go to the ancient sages of rabbinical texts. So, slaves in the Mishnah. A Hebrew slave spoken of in the Torah is an Israelite who the court sold into servitude forcibly, or one who sold herself voluntarily, or himself. If, for example, a man committed a theft and has no means to pay the value of stolen objects, the court sells him. With the exception of a thief, the court may not sell any Israelite. When the Torah says, if you buy a Hebrew slave, as in Exodus 21, it refers to one whom the court has sold. It is permissible to work a heathen slave relentlessly. Even though it is lawful, the quality of benevolence and the path of wisdom demand of a human being to be merciful and striving for justice. One should not press this heavy yoke on his slave and torment him, but should give him to eat and drink of everything. The sages of old were in the habit of sharing with the slave every dish they ate, and they fed the cattle as well as the slaves before they themselves sat down to eat. Nor should a master disgrace his servant by hand or words. And the biblical law surrendered them to servitude, but not to disgrace. He should not madly scream at his servant, but speak to him gently, and listen to his complaints. Cruelty is frequently to be found only among the heathen who worship idols. The progeny of our father Abraham, however, the people of Israel, upon whom God bestowed the greatness of the Torah, commanding them to keep the laws of goodness, are merciful towards all creatures. So too, in speaking of the divine attributes which he has commanded us to imitate, the psalmist says, his mercy is all over his works. Psalm 145. Whoever is merciful will receive mercy, as it is written. He will be merciful and compassionate to you and multiply you. Deuteronomy. Rav Yehuda, it is prohibited for a person to taste anything until he gives food to his animals, as it is stated in the verse. And I will give grass in the field for your animals, in Deuteronomy 11. And only afterward is it written in that verse, and you shall eat and be satisfied. And I have yet to feed my animals, so I may not eat. This verse is out of the Hebrew Tanakh. You may also buy them from among the children of aliens resident among you, or from their families that are among you, whom they begot in your land. These shall become your property. Leviticus. The laws applying to the Canaanite slave apply whether the master purchases the Canaanite slave from a fellow Jew or a resident alien, a Gentile, living under our jurisdiction, or a person from another nation. Similarly, a resident alien, a Gentile, living under our jurisdiction, or a person from another nation has a prerogative of selling himself to a Jew as a slave, then he is a slave with regard to all matters. Similarly, when a Gentile sells his sons and daughters, they become Canaanite slaves. So this is the whole culture. And you can see how it works. It's not that they're adding anything to the text. In Leviticus, they've just dropped the fellow Israelites to being slaves, that they're now called workers, so that way they're not held for a time period. But they still have to pay their debts. Similarly, when a Gentile sells his sons and daughters, they become Canaanite slaves. This is reflected by Leviticus 25:45. From the children of the residents, from them and from their families, who are with you, who give birth in your land, you may purchase. All of these are Canaanite slaves with regard to all matters. It also says you must not rule over them to crush them. On the contrary, you should be generous with him and tell him maybe Hashem, maybe God, will help you and provide you with a redeemer. So they are allowed to be redeemed by a family member. Or you will gain the funds in some other way through divine providence. And we're going to look at that. When a Jew gains ownership of a slave from a Gentile, he has the right to only the slave's labor. So he can't take anything else, just the slave's labor. If a Jew seizes possession of a Gentile who was a minor, or finds a Gentile child, and has him immersed with the intent that he become a convert, he becomes a convert. Then, if his intent was the Gentile to become a slave, he becomes a converted slave. If the intent was that he become a free man, then he becomes a free man.